What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is your boy Jay Spence, and I'm live right now with my main man, Bruce Nolan, and we are here on I'm gonna call this the Buffalo Rumblings Live. We haven't done this before. Normally, we each have our own show, but this is the Buffalo Rumblings Live cut down special. And the Buffalo Bills have cut their roster down to 53. It looks pretty much, I think, the way that most of us felt like it was going to look. There's a couple surprises, not many, but I'm joined today by my good friend Bruce Nolan. How's it going today, Bruce?
Dude, it's a party all the time. Disco balls, dancers, the whole thing.
well, I'm sorry. Every time you say that to me, I actually laugh at that. But look, we got down. We made some cuts. I'm going to throw the graphic up now to start it off, and we're just going to get to it. So we're actually going into this with two quarterbacks. So we released Jake Fromm and Davis Webb. Running back Antonio Williams, Tanner Gentry, Isaiah Hodgins, Steven Sims. So there's a lot of guys here that I don't think were surprises. Were there any surprises for you, Bruce?
I think the surprise for me was Reed Ferguson. Not because he's not going to be back. I think we all expect him to be back. I just hadn't considered him as being a player that could potentially qualify and be on the lookout for that whole, hey, why don't you just hang out in the parking lot for a day? I hadn't identified him as being one of the players that I thought would qualify for that. So when it first happened, I was like, whoa, wait. It took me a second to calibrate in my head. I'm like, okay, obviously they're not going to go without a long snapper. They're not going to cut and stay away from Reed Ferguson right after making him the highest paid long snapper in the league earlier this offseason. We all saw AJ Epinesa actually miss a snap when he attempted to do it. So Reed Ferguson has had years and years of no errant snaps. AJ Epinesa got minutes and minutes of no errant snaps. So AJ Epinesa screwed up like 1 out of 4, and Reed Ferguson has done hundreds without there being a problem. So if that doesn't tell you the value of a good long snapper, I don't know what does. So for me, I don't think there's a lot of things that were shocking overall. I think that more shocking to me would be if any of these players like Isaiah Hodgins, if a player like Rashad Wagoose, if they would have made the 53, that would have been the story. So the fact that they didn't make the 53 isn't the story. It would have been a story had they made the 53.
Right. Well, let me ask you this, though, because the one surprise, and you and I spoke briefly prior to going live, and we both said we're absolutely proud of the fan base for the lack of overreaction. But was Jacob Hollister a surprise on this list for you at all?
No, he wasn't a surprise. I actually predicted that he got cut on Friday with Nate Geary on Food for Thought. I predicted that Hollister was one of the people who would get cut and then brought back. He would be one of the people who was waiting in the parking lot. He's a vested veteran, which means he got more than 4 years in the league. And he had a very, very, very low cap hit when it comes to dead cap money. So it costs you $127,000 or $150,000 in dead cap to be able to do that maneuver. So yes, Hollister is eligible for return, and I would highly anticipate that he would do that. I think that really when you look at this roster, you have to look at it as fluid and then find the points of fluidity. Say, okay, who made the initial 53? Who could potentially be moved? And then who could come back to replace the person you just moved? Craig's kind enough to tell me how good I look right now. Let me just tell you, man, that icon is looking fresh. It's looking fresh. So for me, I think when you identify the players who could potentially be moved off the roster tomorrow, I think there's 5 that you have to consider.
My audio went out, so keep going. I'm going to fix my audio and be right back with you.
So I think really you have to look at 5 potential possibilities when it comes to people who could be off the roster tomorrow. Isaiah McKenzie, Jaquan Johnson, Tommy Sweeney, Harrison Phillips, Marquez Stevenson. These are players that could be moved to IR tomorrow, and you could have 5 people come back. You could have 3 of those 5. You could have 2 of those 5. You could have 4 of those 5 come back. So when you move these players off to IR, then the question is, okay, who's come back to replace them? I think Reed Ferguson, Jacob Hollister make obvious sense. I would be completely floored if Reed Ferguson and Jacob Hollister are not back on this team tomorrow. But then after that, you've still got 3 spots. And that's where it becomes interesting because 5 people went out: McKenzie, Johnson, Sweeney, Phillips, Stevenson. You might say, well, Stevenson came back from his injury. Well, he did, but then he suffered a head injury and then he went out. So depending on their particular timetables, we could end up with no return men, which means Steven Sims is now an option to come back, even though he was only on the team for a little bit. If you need a return man who you can trust and you're worried that Stevenson and McKenzie are not going to be around, Steven Sims makes a lot of sense. This is also the window where you could potentially see a pull from another team's roster, where you have players like Travis Benjamin, who got cut from the 49ers. If the Bills think to themselves, well, we could bring Steven Sims back just to return until McKenzie and or Stevenson are back, or we could go grab another player's version of Steven Sims, which is, of course, Travis Benjamin, then you could see that at this spot. And you could potentially see Josh Thomas back. Why could you see Josh Thomas back if he clears waivers? And the answer to that is because if you put Jaquan Johnson on IR, again, I don't know the timetable of the injury. All of this stuff is dependent on the timetable for the injury. So if you bring Josh Thomas back, that gives you 4 safeties again because Hamlin made the 53. So if Jaquan Johnson goes to IR and you don't bring back a safety, you've now only got 3 safeties on your active roster. I don't think a team would go into the regular season with 3 safeties on their active roster. Now, you might say, what about Saron Neal? Well, Saron Neal hasn't been playing safety at all since like his rookie year. He's a full-blown corner at this point, mostly a special teams player. But that isolates Ferguson, Hollister, Josh Thomas maybe, Steven Sims maybe, and also Cam Lewis to potentially come back. Because right now there's only 5 corners on the roster. Why would they cut Cam Lewis? Well, they cut him twice last year, and he passed through waivers both times.
Twice.
So you're not really worried too much about not having him make it through waivers and coming back. So if you think about it, the players that you're willing to cut that you want to bring back, players who you have a wink, nod, wink, wink, elbow, elbow kind of agreement with, where they're going to stay in the parking lot, and those are vested veterans with low dead cap hits. Then other players who you might be comfortable are players who you've cut before. And you're like, well, nobody picked him up the last 4 times I cut him. So I'm pretty sure they're not going to pick him up this time. It's not like the pro scouting department of some other random teams be like, guys. I know we passed on Cam Lewis 4 times before, but this is the time.
This is the moment.
So those are some of your options. I think it's healthy to look at it as, okay, here is the initial 53. Who's coming out and who's coming in?
Well, let me ask you this, because one of the guys who it seems like by and large the fan base wanted to be gone was Bobby Hart, and he is gone at this point. But I'm also still seeing some chatter that he may be an option to return. Is it? Are you looking at Bobby Hart as an option for that, or is the offensive line pretty much set how you see it?
I would very much not like Bobby Hart to come back, please.
I'm seeing the chatter, and actually, I just saw a comment. Let's see it's saying that he's a vested veteran. They cut him to make room to place guys on, and so Spin thinks that Bobby will be back tomorrow.
No. No. That's nope.
Okay, we'll move.
I'm not even going to entertain it.
Well, moving on from there, because I did also want to know. So we're going into this thing with 2 quarterbacks. Now this is how I wanted the team to go: Josh and then Mitch. That's how it was happening. Are we going to possibly try and bring back somebody for the role that Jake Fromm played last year, with the COVID restrictions and everything going on? Do you think that that's something that the team is looking at, or do you feel like, okay, we're moving on from Fromm now? It was nice while it lasted. Now we're cool.
I think that when asked about it, Sean McDermott flat out said, there's no plan for us to keep a COVID quarterback this particular year. Unless something has changed in the last couple of weeks, I would not anticipate that to be the case. Now, you'd have to ask him what his logic and line of thinking is as to why last year but not this year when it comes to COVID quarterback. Maybe he's happy with the vaccination status of his particular quarterbacks, and he knows that there's a possibility that they keep him far enough away that if Josh were to have to be on the list, that Mitch wouldn't. And if Mitch was going to have to go on the list, Josh wouldn't. Maybe that's the plan. I don't know. But for whatever reason, they don't feel the need to keep a COVID quarterback, and they didn't act like they were going to keep a COVID quarterback. If you remember last year, they actually kept 3 on the initial 53. Mm-hmm. They didn't do the thing they're doing today. They didn't go down to 2 and then bring 1 back. So if they changed their mind, I think we would have seen them keep 3 on the initial 53.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And I think the thing is, like you said, I know you said it may be that they're comfortable with the vaccination status, or I also think that it's just a year later, a year removed from the initial shock and fear of everything that was happening with COVID. Even though we still don't know everything, there's more understanding. So I feel like the team is more comfortable because they made it a full year and they knew how to operate. So I don't think the COVID quarterback or the emergency COVID quarterback is something that we should really focus on too much. But Chris Janke, the real Chris Janke, wants to know, do you think there's a chance that we sign or claim someone from another team tomorrow? I know there's a couple comments that mentioned the cornerback from Washington. I feel like the team is happy with cornerback, but just to the first part, how do you feel about the possibility of a claim or a signing from another roster?
I think returner seems to be the most obvious one, because the only potentially healthy returner they have is someone who they literally just picked up. So they wouldn't have any sort of particular loyalty towards Steven Sims. I mentioned Travis Benjamin. So I think that that's an opportunity right there. I think offensive tackle could be an opportunity, but to be fair, everybody is looking for an offensive tackle. You saw a lot of trades today, and some of them were offensive linemen, because everybody is looking for a tackle depth. Offensive line depth is a problem for a lot of teams around the league. I mean, the New York Giants are trying like they're going out of business to try to get offensive linemen in front of them so they don't completely destroy any chance they have to evaluate their quarterback, Daniel Jones, an extremely important year for them. So I can say offensive tackle, but there may not be anybody out there as far as offensive tackle goes. So I think corner is a possibility. Absolutely. I think returner is the biggest possibility when it comes to that, because it's not going to be defensive line. And the reason it's not going to be defensive line is because you trade away Daryl Johnson so you could fit F.A. Obata there. So you're clearly very happy with your group. You were whittling it down. You weren't looking to build it up. You were whittling it down. So for me, I think that probably returner and maybe corner. I think that the thing that you have to understand about corner is that it's always going to be a thing where they value the system knowledge. I mean, when was the last time you saw the Bills make a mid-season maneuver at corner?
Right.
Ever? I mean, it's just not something they do. I think they value systemic knowledge extremely highly at corner. So as much as I would like Jimmy Moreland, who is the Washington corner, who I think could come in and immediately put pressure on Taron Johnson, because remember, Taron Johnson got benched last year for Cam Lewis. I would much rather, if Taron Johnson somehow doesn't take the next step and isn't the playoff pick 6 Taron Johnson, which he wasn't the big chunk of last year, right? He's reasonable. He's a passable nickel corner. But if for whatever reason he, erodes, then I would much rather go to Jimmy Moreland than I would go to Cam Lewis. But that's just me. They value systemic knowledge so significant that I don't see it happening. I think that the reasonable chance here is returner. I think that's the reasonable chance.
Okay. Well, I also actually said, I know returner most times at this point is either like a running back or a wide receiver. So just sticking on the wide receiver talk for a little bit here. I know we kind of talked about McKenzie and we talked about Stevenson with their injuries. I asked you this before we went live, and I knew this comment was going to come up. Jared Foster wants to know, depending on McKenzie and Stevenson's injuries or them going on IR, could we see John Brown back in Buffalo? And everybody, like I said the other day, I miss Smoke being here, but I'm happy to have Emmanuel Sanders in that role. But what do you think about the possibility? Because John Brown basically requested his release from the Las Vegas Raiders, and they granted it. So he made $2 million to not play, and now he's free. So what are your thoughts regarding that?
I would be absolutely floored if John Brown came back today. Absolutely floored. And here's the reason why. John Brown wants to be a big part of the offense. And that was one of the reasons why it seems probable that he would have asked for his release. He didn't get cut. He asked to be released. And it's probably because he saw the writing on the wall and some of the younger receivers they want to start to feature in Las Vegas. I mean, if you look at the receivers in Las Vegas, there's a lot of youth there that they want to try and feature. You know, Brian Edwards has been getting rave reviews to the point where he's getting ridiculous Hall of Famer dumb level comps from training camp. Oh man, he's Randy Moss mixed with T.O. You know, it's stupid stuff. So you have that. You have Henry Ruggs, who was a first-round pick, who apparently no one wants to talk about. Henry Ruggs is there. Hunter Renfrow is locked in at slot receiver. So John Brown, wide receiver 4 at best, plus Zay Jones was impressing coaches there in Las Vegas. So maybe wide receiver 4, 5. John Brown's like, no. I'm at least a number 2. So for him, is he going to come back here? I like Emmanuel Sanders better than John Brown. I think that was an upgrade when you went from John Brown to Emmanuel Sanders. And I like John Brown. I wanted to keep John Brown. But the reason I wanted to keep John Brown is because I didn't think we were going to get Emmanuel Sanders for 1 year, $6 million. So for me, you come back, he's wide receiver 4 here and maybe wide receiver 5, depending on how you feel about Gabriel Davis and his step forward. So the reason he wouldn't want to come back here, because he's not a vested veteran. He is a vested veteran, so he doesn't have, he's not going to go to waivers. He gets to pick wherever he wants to go. He's a free agent right now. He can sign with any team he wants. So we don't get to claim him. We got to convince him to come back. And if you're not going to be able to offer him the thing that he was mad about not being offered in Vegas, then why would he choose to come here? Yeah. So for me, I don't see it being a fit for anybody. I would be absolutely floored. It doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. And there's a couple questions in here asking, like, if there's a possibility for even a practice squad. John Brown isn't a practice squad player at this point. He's a vested, you know, he's been in the league for so long, and his accomplishments and all that stuff is he's not a practice squad player at all. So as far as, so we both said there are no surprises. Everything that we kind of thought was going to happened here. But bringing this list back up again, the one thing that did not surprise me, but it made me happy just for this bet that I have, is that Isaiah Hodgins has been released. So for those of you who don't know, Joe Miller and myself had a bet that now Joe has lost, that next week on the Hump Day Hotline, not tomorrow, but next week, Joe will be wearing my Cam Newton. And actually, that's a question I can bring up to you now. My Cam Newton jersey for the Patriots. What do you think about the Patriots releasing Cam? Let's get some division talk going on.
First off, I would like a small amount of credit. I think I would like 14% credit for the bet that you have with Joe, because I was the one who suggested this in the comment section of Hump Day Hotline. When it went down. So this is why you always got to be in the comments, because the comments, good stuff happens in the comments, guys. It all goes down in the comments. So for me, I think I just want a little bit of credit. In regards to the Patriots and Cam Newton, I'm not surprised they cut Cam Newton. I am surprised that they didn't give him a shot at the very beginning to see if he could bounce back and give Mac Jones more time. Now, right. I'm not surprised they cut him, because Cam Newton views himself as a starter in this league. He said that many times. He views himself as a starter. So if you view yourself as a starter, you and the team, in order to have a harmonious relationship, you and the team need to understand and agree on what you are. This is one of the reasons why contract negotiations are so interesting. It's because what you think you are has to line up with what the team thinks you are. And if you think you're a starter and the team that just paid you thinks you're a backup, and the team that just gave you a contract that has a lot of incentives built into it that are based on starting, there's going to be some bitterness there. There's a very reasonable possibility there's some bitterness there. And so I understand why you just say, you know what, I'm going to bring back Brian Hoyer. Brian Hoyer has been a backup in this league for a while. He got cut. He's a possibility to come back. I think that there's a possibility that you have him come back and be the backup to Mac Jones and just say, hey, we're moving forward with it. I'm not shocked it happened. I'm shocked they didn't roll with Cam for at least a little bit just to see. Now, I thought Cam was washed. You and I have talked about this before. I know you're a huge Cam guy. I thought Cam was washed. I just think the arm is washed. I don't think his skill level has diminished. I think his body has diminished and deteriorating to the point where his throwing motion has looked, it was all janky for 2 years now. So for me, when I look at Cam Newton throw the ball, I just go, he doesn't, it's just not right anymore. You know, he's had to make so many accommodations for so many other injuries. It's like a golfer or a kicker. We've talked a lot on my show about kicker injuries and how you always have it until you don't. When you get a kicker and they get hurt, sometimes they just never recover. We saw that from Stephen Hauschka.
Yeah,
you get hurt and you just never recover. It's a little bit like that sometimes for quarterbacks and injuries to their shoulder, because you just never get that natural throwing motion back again. The rest of your career, you are trying to throw robotically to accommodate for weaknesses or injuries in your throwing shoulder. And Cam has been through a lot.
Yep.
So for me, I'm not surprised that he got cut given the fact that he was going to be the backup. But I am surprised they didn't give him an option or an opportunity to prove that he still has some stuff in the tank.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree. Not as far as, I don't want to go as far as saying that I think he's washed, but I'm gonna go as far as saying that I think, you know, going into this season, I thought if he had an opportunity, he had to prove a lot. So, I mean, maybe the Patriots do see something that says, hey, he's washed, or maybe it's just the youth movement. Like, okay, Mac is here, he's doing everything that we kind of want him to do. He's going to be like hopefully the second coming of Tom Brady in their eyes and everything. I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Where do you kind of see him landing? Everything that I've looked at, it looks like they're talking Houston Texans, maybe the Dallas Cowboys, or backup position. Same thing for the Ravens. That's all I've been seeing.
Yeah, I think the backup for the Ravens makes a lot of sense. But I do really like Huntley there, and I think that they like Huntley as well.
I do too.
I also think that there's one of the benefits to having the Ravens quarterback structure is this year, the Ravens will spend less on quarterbacks than any team in the league.
Nice.
That's a competitive advantage. They spend very, very little money on quarterbacks with Lamar Jackson and Huntley. So for me, Ravens lose a little bit of a competitive advantage by bringing Cam Newton in because it's money you can't spend elsewhere. I think the Broncos make a lot of sense. But your window to compete for a starting quarterback job this year is basically over. So you have to go to a place where they're worried about the health of their starting quarterback or their backup situation's terrible. And the Cowboys make sense for that because the backup situation for the Cowboys is awful. So, I mean, Cooper Rush is the backup quarterback for Dallas right now. Right. So, listen, I don't care what you think about Cam Newton, whether or not he's washed. I think he's an upgrade over Cooper Rush. So I think the Cowboys make a lot of sense as well.
I would agree there. You don't think that the opportunity to possibly start over Tyrod Taylor in Houston is there?
I don't think that the Texans would go for Cam Newton.
Okay.
I don't think that particular front office, what I know of them, I don't think they would go for Cam Newton at this point. That doesn't strike me. He doesn't strike me as their type of player. And they're their guys. There was a lot of turnover in Houston this year. A lot of turnover in Houston this year. And if you look at some of the other maneuvers that Houston has made, I don't look at that and think, yeah, you know what? That looks like a Cam Newton style team to me. I do think they are going to be a little heavier in personnel formation, personnel packages. I think that David Culley talked a little bit about being a little heavier, being more of a 12 personnel team. And I think that fits Cam Newton really well. But the culture thing, they just don't strike me as a team that would like Cam Newton. I could be wrong, but it just doesn't seem like a fit to me.
Okay. Well, a couple more questions. I know you have a couple things coming up. And actually, you have something with Greg Thompson tonight, I believe.
We're recording tonight, but it goes live on Thursday. We're going to do
my bad. See, I'm making all these announcements. My bad.
Yeah, no, it's all good. So coming up this week on the Bruce exclusive, it's Thursday, and the Bruce exclusive will be featuring Greg Thompson from Cover One. We're going to be doing a fantasy football primer for Buffalo Bills, specifically Buffalo Bills fantasy questions, and as it relates to that. So I think that that's going to be fun. And then Friday, obviously, I'm going to have Food for Thought live here on the Buffalo Rumblings YouTube network at 9 o'clock with Nate Geary. And it's going to be fun. We're going to talk about the 53 there. At that point, it will be completely set. So that'll be fun to kind of have okay, it's been set by then. Hopefully practice squad set as well. And we'll kind of have the entire thing to go through.
Yeah, then we can really have some discussions. And speaking of like how we can have some good discussions, don't forget tomorrow night is Hump Day Hotline. It's Wednesday, Hump Day Hotline. We have special guest Sal Capaccio joining us from WGR. He's going to be coming in to talk about this whole thing. He's going to talk about the 53-man roster that we have as of today. He's going to talk about the guys that at that point we should be able to see some movement and have some guys back as well. So we got a couple things coming up this week that's going to be fun for you all as far as content. My man Eli is in the comments. He said he's heartbroken about Bam Johnson. So Bam Johnson is actually his neighbor currently. He won't be anymore in a couple of days, but he's heartbroken about Bam Johnson because he's traded. He's very happy he'll get a better opportunity to play, but he's sad that he's gone from here. How do you feel about the team making the decision to trade him? Do you think that the depth we have on that defensive line is set to the point where we can trade away a special teams talent and a defensive line talent like Bam?
It was always going to be an issue. I mean, all of the 53-man roster projections that have come out over the last week or two were, what are you going to do on the defensive line? What are you going to do? Are you going to keep 11? Are you going to keep 12? If you're keeping 10, who are you cutting? Where are you finding the room for these players? The obvious answer to that was make a trade with somebody. And I think the irony is that the Panthers let F.A. Obata walk, who went to the Bills, right, who bumped out Daryl Johnson, who went back to the Panthers.
So we basically got to upgrade in a draft pick.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. I'm
40 chest, baby.
So, when Eli mentioned that to me earlier, we were talking earlier, and he's like, I'm sad. I think it sucks for him. And I'm like, well, it sucks in the sense of, as Bills fans, and obviously for Eli, like I said, it's his neighbor. But the thing is, the way this team is built, he wouldn't have gotten the opportunity this year. He just would have kind of got lost in the shuffle unless there were some injuries, or he would have had a moment here or there as far because the team loves to rotate to keep guys fresh, but he wouldn't have been a prominent figure on the defensive line. So I'm very happy for him, and I'm hoping that he gets a big role down there in Carolina because he's a talented guy, super talented.
I mean, you don't take somebody in the 7th round typically who's a defensive lineman unless they have something to work with, because there's so little chance of late day 3 picks working out on the defensive line. So when you take them that late, you're like, well, it gets something to work with, right? And for him, it was length. It came from a lower level of competition, and he had ideal elite level length. And so the thing was just, can you teach this guy the pass rush moves? And we've seen some development from Bam Johnson. Now, I think if you would have seen significant development from Bam Johnson, the Bills probably would not have gone out and signed F.A. Obata.
Right.
But they saw some development in him, and the league saw enough development in him that they could get a draft pick for him.
Yeah. The D line in general is not shocking to me, but there are some things that were a surprise to me. Actually, this comment here, all the folks who thought a veteran D lineman would get cut were wrong. I was one of those guys, because for me, I felt like the depth that we had on this team and the defensive tackles and everything, I thought Addison was gone. I thought, I don't know, but I thought we were going to have to at least get rid of one or two. What are your thoughts on that? We kept everybody, even, with the youth movement that we have, we kept everybody.
I never considered the fact that the Bills would cut Addison or Hughes as a real thing, ever. I just didn't see it at all. With the way that the Bills like to rotate defensive linemen, and the way that Sean McDermott talked about Mario Addison, and the way that Mario Addison handled himself in front of the media as far as being a mentor to these younger defensive linemen, I just never saw it as a possibility. The only one of the veteran defensive linemen who I thought could have had an opportunity to get cut was Vernon Butler before Harrison Phillips got hurt. Once Harrison Phillips got hurt, I think that punched Vernon Butler's ticket to the 53-man roster.
Okay. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. And I guess for me, So again, you're right. That makes sense because if Harrison wasn't injured, then one of them would have had to go at the very least. So yeah, Butler, I think he punched his ticket, unfortunately, with an injury to another player. But hey, you got any other thoughts for us? I'm not, like I said, I know you got some plans. I'm gonna let you get out of here. You have any other thoughts you want to share with everyone?
Not really. I think that the Bills keeping 6 linebackers, I think is interesting to me because a lot of people thought they would have to go to 5 in order to make some of the other stuff happen. But this guaranteed Tyler Dodson a shot. I think the emergence, I don't want to say emergence, but the flashing of Andre Smith in preseason really makes you
Mhm.
feel a little bit better about linebacker depth this year than you did. Because if you think about it, this year's linebackers basically identical to last
Yeah.
year's linebackers. Delshon Phillips made the initial 53 last year, but he got hurt. So the Bills' 6 linebackers this year are basically the same as they were last year, which is hilarious because last year we thought linebacker depth was a problem. This year, no one's talking about it, but they're the exact same people. So I think that's hilarious because what it means is that we saw Matakevich and Andre Smith flash in the preseason, and now all of a sudden we feel better. I just think that's an interesting point to note.
Well, I also think that it comes from during the early part of the season, AJ Klein wasn't being used properly. He wasn't good in coverage. He was missing assignments. He was missing just they I want to say around week 6, week 7, they started to figure out how to use him. So I think he adds to that. I think, obviously Matt Milano adds to that. And then I'm happy that we're not getting any hate from my guy Tremaine Edmunds. Like I feel like we've beat him up over the summer for no reason. So yeah, I think that we have perfect depth there. I'm not saying that we have the best linebacking group in the league, but I'm absolutely happy with the depth that we're going into the season with.
Yeah, I think that I don't want to make too much of the AJ Klein. They know how to use him. I don't want to make too much of that because knowing how to use him just means asking him to run in a straight line. So if that's knowing how to use him, hi AJ, yeah, okay, you see the ball, yeah, okay, go get it.
Go get it.
Like if
Go get
that's
it.
what you do to maximize his value, if what you do to maximize AJ Klein's value is don't ask him to do anything that linebackers do, then I don't think that's really you utilizing him properly. That's you just trying to hide him by having him do nothing. Just run in a straight line, AJ. Can you just do that for me, right?
Just do it.
Just so I don't want to make too much of it. So I agree that he's better blitzing, but he's better blitzing because he wasn't good at other things. Now, I will say this that there was a game last year that was actually after the game that we were all like, oh, this is the AJ Klein game, where I thought, hey, this is the game where AJ Klein was good at doing AJ Klein things. AJ Klein was good at doing linebacker things, like actual linebacker stuff. And I was excited about that. For me, I think the bigger thing is that you get to keep Dodson, who I actually liked in limited snaps last year, but again, got hurt. I liked Dodson. And if you start to see some stuff from from Andre Smith, I think that's the thing that really gives you a lot more oomph about your linebacker depth, makes you feel a little bit better about your linebacker depth versus AJ Klein knowing how to use them. I try not to make too much of it because let's be honest, Sean McDermott has seen AJ Klein before. He was a veteran who knew the system. So if you just now figured out how to use him when you knew him before, that doesn't speak super highly. He was on your roster before when you were in Carolina. So you've already had experience with AJ Klein. You should know how to use him in this particular system. So I'm not discounting it completely, but it feels like the less you ask AJ Klein to do, the better off he is. And that doesn't make me necessarily feel better about the depth. The thing that makes me feel better about the depth is Dodson being healthy. And I thought he was fair last year, and potential emergence of AJ Klein. I'm sorry, Andre Smith. And I say emergence as like in he could be a reasonable linebacker.
Okay. Well, we'll see. Like I said, I'm thrilled that we're not getting hate for Tremaine. So I'm going into the season. It's my campaign this year for Tremaine. Last year it was my man Andre Roberts, and he's gone. The team let me down there. But this year is going to be for Tremaine. So Bruce, I thank you for doing this with
Maybe
me, man.
It's been Spence.
I know. Everybody
Maybe
I fall
it's
in
you,
love
dude.
with, they end up leaving. They leave me
Yeah,
every time.
don't fall in love with Tremaine. Don't do a hashtag resign Tremaine. Don't do that, because if you do
Okay.
that, he'll
All right.
leave.
But see, they gave him the 5th year. I'm hoping I'm just
I
hoping they
know.
extend him real quick, man. Like, real quick, we got a couple of seconds. The thing is, so I understand that he hasn't come out and been Ray Lewis. I understand he hasn't come out and been, he hasn't been probably the best linebacker that we've had in the last 10 years. I understand that. But for the age that he is, he's put on a hell of a performance every year, including the year that he was injured last year. He had a shoulder injury. He just didn't look the same. He didn't wrap up early on, but he had a very solid year. Can he improve in areas? Can he, be quicker as far as making certain decisions and making adjustments? Yeah, but I feel like there's a lot of linebackers in the league that can be better at something. What I'm saying is he's done more good for us than he's not Bobby Hart. He's not me on defense saying, "Oh my God, please don't bring him back," like you said earlier. He's by far above that, but we give him the same criticism, we give him the same treatment as if he's been failing us. But he hasn't been failing us. He just hasn't lived up to his potential yet. I guess for me, that's why I get passionate about some of these guys, because it's like, come on, man, you gotta cut him a break.
For me, I think that if Tremaine Edmunds was a third or fourth round pick, I don't think anyone would be talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't. I think if he was a third or fourth round pick, nobody would be talking about it, because it's not about whether or not Tremaine Edmunds is reasonable, because he is reasonable. It's going to be the same conversation. Just so you know, mark my words, we're going to have the same conversation about Ed Oliver if he doesn't burst onto the scene this year. And the answer will be, he's reasonable, but you don't want a top 10 pick to be reasonable. That's Oliver, right? You don't want a top 20 pick to be reasonable, which is Tremaine Edmunds, because what you might potentially pay them, I mean, you're looking at a Darius Leonard, Fred Warner level contract. Do you want to pay that money to Tremaine Edmunds? I would not want to pay that money to Tremaine Edmunds, not because he's not reasonable, because he's not them. I don't want to pay that money to him because there's a significant gap between what you're being paid to do and what you're actually doing. He's fine. Tremaine Edmunds is fine. He's had really good moments. He's had less than stellar moments. He's a perfectly reasonable, I would even go as far as to say he's above average linebacker. But do we want to pay an above average off-ball linebacker $19 million a year? That's the question. It's not, is he good? It's, we're staring down the barrel of a gigantic paycheck. Do we want to pay someone who's okay that money? So one of the things on the book of Bruce, which I did previously this offseason, is one of the things you have to do when you're making re-sign decisions is the threshold of the level of play that you are willing to re-sign has to change. You can't re-sign okay players, because okay players at a certain position might get $4 million a year, but an okay player as a draft pick gets $400,000 a year. That's a big difference. So you can no longer re-sign. You got to go from, okay, how bad do they have to be before I say, nope, not going to re-sign him? Elite? No, re-sign him all the time. Do what you got to do, right? How about very good? Very good. Okay, well, yeah, you want to re-sign him. How about just okay or good? Like, how far down the list do they have to go before you go, you know what? Perfectly reasonable player, but I'm not going to pay him. And that's kind of the conversation that we're in when it comes to Tremaine Edmunds. It's not because he's not a reasonable player. He is a reasonable player. I just don't want to pay a reasonable player $19 million. Now, is there a possibility that he steps forward this year and he's no longer a reasonable player? He's very, very good. Yeah, that's a possibility, in which case we have a different discussion. But I think that same conversation is coming for Ed Oliver. I'm telling you right now, because Ed Oliver, when I watch Ed Oliver, I go, that's a reasonable 3-tech. He's a reasonable player. We're going to have this same conversation. I can almost guarantee it. If Ed Oliver doesn't come out and have 8-9 sacks this year, we're going to have the same conversation next year about Ed Oliver. We're going to go, yeah, he's reasonable. Yeah, he's absolutely reasonable. And Richard Rush says, I don't think Edmunds will warrant big money. I'm telling you, the league likes Edmunds a lot more than the Bills Mafia does.
And that's my point too. That's my point too. I think, and even like, I always respect and I listen to a lot of things you say, but like I kind of disagree even with you here. I don't think that he's just an okay player. I think that Tremaine, I think the injury hurt him last year. I think Star opting out hurt him last year the same way it hurt Tre'Davious White's numbers. I think Tre'Davious White is a better player than it shows last year because the team wasn't a cohesive unit as we've seen in the past. So I'm looking forward to this season for both Edmunds and you're mentioning a bunch of different players. I feel like this year we're going to see the defense that we saw 2 years ago instead of last year. So I'm looking for that. But hey, ladies and gentlemen, my guy Bruce joined me tonight. We just wanted to go live and do something fun for you guys, just to kind of have a quick reaction and talk about the things that's coming up. I do want to make a quick announcement. Just confirmed it, so I'm gonna load this up now. Next Wednesday. So tomorrow we got the Hump Day Hotline with Sal. So make sure you're here with us next Wednesday. If you are in Buffalo, if you are in Orchard Park, I need y'all to come on down to O'Neill's. Joe and myself will be doing the Hump Day Live at O'Neill's at 9 p.m. next Wednesday. Come and kick it with us. We're going to have a good time. You got anything else for me, Bruce, before I get out of here?
Not a thing, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Oh man, thank you for doing this. I felt like it was the perfect time to do it with the way the schedule they finally released the team. So
would have been interesting if we had to do this without a 53-man roster.
Yeah, so I think we're going to do another prediction here. But so, ladies and gentlemen, have a great night. Thank you so much for joining us. And you already know how I do it here. Take care of each other, love each other, and live in peace. And as always, stay positive and test negative. Go Bills.